Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to start off with wishing my oldest daughter, Sam, a happy birthday, number 18. Now graduating from high school during the corona crisis and dealing with it very well, but happy 18th birthday. Welcome to adulthood. In fact, this is going to be the first time around she's going to get to vote. We'll see how that goes. But I'm really excited for her and all of the places she's going to go. So I wanted to throw that out first and foremost. Congratulations. You've made it. There were some times where maybe we weren't quite sure, but you have made it to 18. And now, guess what? You are responsible for you. But I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I want the best for you. So happy 18th birthday. Now let's move on to the other stuff. Thank goodness for Senator Sherrod Brown. Big fan of Senator Brown, who today, while going after Steve Mnuchin, actually brought up the fact of something that I've been talking about for a while now. The fact that Trump is forcing open slaughterhouses and meat and production plants across the country using the Defense Production Act and simultaneously giving those employers immunity from any of their workforce getting sick. And Brown was, very forthright. How many workers have to die for the Dow? How many workers is it worth to raise the Dow or to add to our GDP? Of which, of course, Mnuchin had to do I'm very proud of the president and all the stuff that he's done. And you go, how is that possible? How is it possible that everyone in this administration, goes right to the knees? And I'm so proud of the work that we've done. You're so proud of forcing people back into a workplace that you haven't ensured is safe? That's something you're proud of? And truth be told, yeah, probably. So good on Sherrod Brown. I'm happy there's somebody, at least somebody, fighting for average, everyday working folks. And again, this brings up come election time. This is something that as quote unquote the economy reopens, and by reopen they mean forcing people back to jobs that aren't yet safe enough, that they've done nothing to ensure are going to be safe. There have been no orders for OSHA to enforce anything. In fact, as we talked about yesterday, OSHA has done nothing. They've investigated 7% of the OSHA of the COVID-related claims and no citations. So they've done nothing. They've literally done nothing. And I don't expect anything out of this Labor Department and out of this OSHA. I expect zero. And that's exactly why he's there. That's why the wealth class wants Trump in the White House for all of his shenanigans and all of his idiocy. They want him there because there's no cop on the beat. They get to do whatever they want. And this is another one of those moments where I throw in there, the reality is this is the reason that workers need unions and need them quickly. So today we're also going to talk about, how do we get to that point? How do workers organize? How do they fight for a voice in the job? Because right now it's not only about wages, it's about conditions, man. If you're being forced back into a workplace that is not safe and they're not providing you with adequate personal protective equipment and they're not adhering to social distancing policies, what are you going to do? Your option, quit. That's it. That's all you've got. And then good luck finding another job that probably isn't doing the same thing. I mean, this is the weird thing. They keep saying, well, if you don't like conditions here, go somewhere else. Problem is, in this environment, I think most of them are all going to be about the same, which is why you stay and you fight. Anyway, today, President Petulant, the big story came out that, for the last 40 years, it's always been a tradition that the sitting president has the previous president come and they hang the portrait and they unveil it. And, it's a, you may not like each other, but it's kind of one of those things that shows that our democracy is somewhat functional, that there's some bit of being cordial, that there's some bit of that you're not petulant little children who can't, be around each other. And look, every tragedy we've had, you've seen all of the presidents come together. As much as George H.W. Bush hated Bill Clinton, and as much as Clinton didn't like Bush, and you go down the list, in those moments where the country needed the show of unity and the show of solidarity, they were there. Can you imagine this child who refuses to have this ceremony? I mean, it's really just bizarre, but truthfully, not surprising. Equally not surprising is Trump was speaking at a White House event today, and he followed a speaker that was from Virginia, and he said, quote, "We're going after Virginia with your crazy governor. We're going after Virginia. They want to take your Second Amendment. You know that, right? You'll have nobody," and this is the punchline, "you'll have nobody guarding your potatoes." Okay, strange look, going, what the hell is he talking about? Potatoes? I'll tell you, to be honest, I didn't even know that they grew potatoes in Virginia. I didn't. In fact, I had to look it up, and they're not in the top 10 producing states. Idaho, of course, the number one by far, and of course, Washington State, number 2. Down the list, way down the list. Wisconsin, Oregon, North Dakota, Colorado, Minnesota, Michigan, California, Maine. Those are your top 10. No Virginia. So again, not quite sure where he got the potato thing from, but there you had it. And this is maybe maybe it's the hydroxychloroquine. Maybe it's whatever drugs he's now on, because as we talked about yesterday, we have now find out that the president went to the White House doctor, and they evidently, had some back and forth, and the doctor put him on this drug. I still don't believe it, and I think, most of the people on the Twitters don't believe it. I don't know why you would lie about it, but again, here's a guy who lies about stuff that you go, why the hell would you lie about that? Most of the stuff Trump lies about, you just kind of baffled by why. But here we are in this situation where a president is clearly not somebody that you believe, saying that he's taking a drug that he's been promoting for a very long time as the cure. Now it's not just the cure, it's also the prevention drug. It's the prophylactic. It's the thing that's going to protect you. Because now he has to be, Superman. And I found it really interesting that the White House physician, or the physician to the president, this Sean Conley, today had to put out a response. And this is one of those weird moments that you go, you got to wonder if Dr. Conley, actually thought that he was going to have to write this letter. Especially, and I got to wonder, what if he's not actually taking it? What if, as I thought, he just started motorboating his mouth and running off at the mouth, and it just, it flew out. And then you got to go with it. Once it's out there, there's no going, oh, well, I lied. I made that up. You now got to cover up the lie, which is why I try not to lie, because it's so much work to cover up. But anyway, the doctor comes out with a letter, a memorandum, if you will, on the subject of hydroxychloroquine. And it says, as previously reported 2 weeks ago, the president's support staff tested positive for COVID-19. The president is in very good health. I don't know why that had to be there, but it's there. And has remained symptom-free. He receives regular COVID-19 testing, all negative to date. After numerous discussions he and I had regarding the evidence for and against the use of hydroxychloroquine, we concluded the potential benefit from treatment outweighed the relative risks. reading the number of side effects, you got to really question that. He says in consultation with our interagency partners and subject matter experts around the country, I continue to monitor the myriad studies investigating potential COVID-19 therapies, and I anticipate employing the same shared medical decision-making based on the evidence at hand in the future. That doesn't say a lot. I guess he's taken it. We don't know how long he's been taking it. We don't know if it's daily or if it was just once. We gave him one pill. It was a really low dose. Didn't even know he took it. Kind of weird. But a lot of questions continue to pop up. Like, where's the evidence that says that this? I get someone saying that, hey, it's going to help you if you get it. It's going to turn the lungs. I'm not quite sure when it became like the vaccine, when we start taking this stuff to prevent. I'm that's new to me. Because we had been told, right, that the guy in the hospital, he was on deathbed, he was on his last leg. They were jamming the tubes, and they gave him this miracle drug, and by morning he was up dancing the jig. Right? I mean, isn't that the story? So I look at this and it's just crazy. But like I said yesterday, I don't believe it. I really don't believe it. And if here's the real important question. If he didn't take it and this doctor lied, should there not be an investigation into this at some point? And then the other part of this is, the reason that we have doctors examining our really fit, really healthy president is because you want to make sure that he's fit for duty. And as I said yesterday, there's some side effects to this drug that are really concerning. Outside of even the all the crazy stuff. I mean, you listen to any commercial on TV and you go through, because I went to Mayo Clinic's website to look up the side effects to this. And, I wanted to do like the Federal Express guy from the 70s voice of reading really, really fast. But there's just so many side effects. Blistering, peeling, loosening of the skin, blurred vision, chest discomfort, cough, hoarseness, dark urine, decreased urination, defective color vision, diarrhea, difficulty breathing, difficulty seeing, dizziness, fever with chills and without chills, a general feeling of tiredness or weakness, headache, inability to move the eyes, increased blinking and spasm of the eyelids, joint and muscle pain, large hive-like swelling on the face, eyelid, lips, tongue, throat, hands, feet, and sex organs, mushroom, loss of hearing, lower back and side pain, noisy breathing. That could be where the noisy breathing comes from. Painful or difficult urination, red irritating eyes, skin lesions, severe mood and mental changes, sore throats, ulcers, sticking out of the tongue, stomach pain, swelling of the hands, feet, and lower legs, swollen of or painful glands, trouble breathing, speaking, swallowing, uncontrolled twisting movements of the neck, trunk, arms, and legs, unusual behavior, unusual bleeding, unusual bruising, unusual facial expressions, unusual tiredness or weakness, yellow eyes or skin. And then the ones I got to yesterday, the fast pounding, uneven heartbeats, the feeling that people are watching you, controlling you, the feeling that others can hear your thoughts. They're in between your ears, like Obama must be in between his ears. And of course, the feeling, seeing and hearing things that aren't there. And you go, is this, seriously, this guy's got a bunch of other problems. Is this something we want to be giving this guy? I mean, if you're the doctor. So then you fast forward today to the press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, who was asked about, is he actually taking it? I mean, reporters were kind of like, could he be lying? And she said, if this were any other president of the United States, the media would take him at his word. And you know what? I actually agree with that. If it were any other president, the media would take his word. Wow, you're taking this drug. We could debate whether it was stupid or not, but the first question is do we believe that he's actually taking it? And that's a valid question given the fact that, over the last 3 years, he has proven himself to be a habitual liar. For instance, Trump has said that The Lancet wrote a report back in December. And again, this is another one of those things where you just go, I don't know. But he said on Monday that there are credible reports out there from The Lancet that evidently the virus came from one in 2019 back in December, and that there were reports in The Lancet medical journal. Well, The Lancet is one of the most respected medical journals in the world. So when he throws that out there, it elicits a response to which, evidently, The Lancet, according to The Lancet, they have sent a letter saying that the Trump administration fabricated this report. It never happened. So he's citing a report that he says they did as his excuse for defunding the World Health Organization. And they're saying, we have no idea what you're talking about. Stop. And this, again, is another one of those moments where you go, if somebody else, this was anybody else, you go, maybe they were mistaken. Maybe they were thinking the New England Journal of Medicine. Maybe they were thinking, I don't know, Mad Magazine's Journal of Medicine. I don't know. But the fact that they had to come out and say, no, this guy's lying. Now, of course, they did it in a much, much nicer way than I am. The reality is the guy's lying. And my problem is why don't we understand that our liar in chief is incapable of being honest and telling the truth? I know. It's alternative facts, Rick. They've got their own facts. Like their website, Truth Over Facts. And I don't even know what the hell that means. But hey, you can visit their website, truthoverfacts.org. I'm sure there'd be a lot of alternative facts there for you. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Am I being too harsh on our liar in chief? Do you think I'm a little too harsh on it? Do you think making up reports that, journals evidently didn't write is a bad thing? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk about this hydroxychloroquine a little bit and, what it means to people taking it, what it means to the folks who are suffering and need this drug. What's it going to mean when there's a mad rush on it? Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Peter Morley is going to be here to share some thoughts on that. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. That was the day 31 dock workers were killed and hundreds more were injured in an explosion at the Raritan River Port in South Amboy, New Jersey. Workers were loading ammunition from freight trains onto ships. The freight's ultimate destination was Pakistan. Practically every structure in South Amboy suffered some form of serious or structural damage, with windows blown out everywhere and debris reported as far as 25 miles away. 5,800 more unexploded anti-personnel mines had been strewn about the port. Demolition experts had to be called in for removal. A subsequent fire at a nearby agricultural phosphorus plant complicated their work. The blast was caused by the detonation of 150 tons of military explosives and gelatin dynamite. The piers, equipment, and railroad cars were all demolished. Over a dozen nearby barges were either on fire or sank. Emergency operations went into effect and a state of emergency was declared. Key industries in the immediate area were seriously damaged, including the International Smelting and Refining Company, Pennsylvania Railroad maintenance shops, and the power plant for New Jersey Power and Light. According to a report by the National Board of Fire Underwriters and the Fire Insurance Rating Organization of New Jersey, packing of the mines and fuses by the Kilgore Company was not in accordance with Army standards, and labeling was confusing. The shipped mines were labeled as M1A1, though all parts but the detonator were identical to M1 mines, discontinued by the Army in 1942 for their apparent defective fuse, leading to accidental firing and explosions. The report refrained from drawing a certain cause or assigning blame. Instead, the underwriters offered a number of possible scenarios and recommendations for best practices to be implemented. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So like I said, the side effects are just, wow. And the ones that catch me, the ones that really, and I said this yesterday on the show, the ones that get me are the feeling that others are watching you or controlling your behavior. Is that really something we want in a narcissist? Do we want to add more of that to someone like Trump? The feeling that others can hear your thoughts, the feeling, seeing, and hearing of things that are not there. I'll tell you, this is the last drug Donald Trump should be anywhere near. And look, I'm not a doctor, don't even play one here, but any doctor who would prescribe this drug to that guy, I'm thinking medical license pull, which is why, again, as I said yesterday, I seriously doubt he's actually taking it. I think it just flew out of his mouth. But here to share some thoughts on, this drug, what it actually does, because I've never taken it, and what this could mean to folks like him. I've asked our good friend Peter Morley to come talk with us. Peter is one of my favorite patient advocates and an incredible voice in the halls of Congress. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Anytime for you, Rick, and thank you for speaking about hydroxychloroquine, which is never easy to pronounce, but it is so important to remember what it does for patients in people like me in my community, in the lupus community, and other autoimmune communities that truly depend on this medication, where it does have an efficacy. And it's I can't say that I experienced any of those side effects. I experienced other side effects.
There are a ton, and I went through them in the last segment. There are a ton of side effects.
Yeah.
All of the blurred vision, all of the irritable this or that, and all of the weakness and fatigue, and all the stuff is there. But it's those three that caught my attention. Going, I don't know that the president of the United States should be taking it as a prophylactic. Look, if you need it, that's one thing. I look at someone like you who clearly needs it to function, but I'm just protecting myself from something that if I just washed my hands, wore a mask, and stayed the hell away from everybody, I wouldn't get. Just seems insane to me.
Yes, it's. I really honestly don't understand where he's going with claiming that he's taking this medication. I don't know if you happen to see the letter that had to be issued from the White House physician.
Yeah.
They actually spoke about that they discussed the risk benefits of the medication, but interestingly, never spoke about the dosing or frequency of the medication, which is normally what you speak about when you are taking the medication.
Right.
So, that was not verified.
So is it possible, and do you think it's possible that maybe they gave him one very small dose just to put it in his mind that he's taking it, and he's going to be okay, and not enough to actually cause any damage? Do you think that's, because originally I said, look, there's no way I believe he took it, and if any doctor gave it to him, maybe they gave him a sugar pill, a placebo of some just to make him go away. Because I just can't imagine you walking into a doctor's office and going, hey, I'd like this really, really dangerous drug with a lot of side effects. Can you give me that? And a doctor going, sure, here you go. I just can't imagine that happening.
No, I can't imagine that happening either. Any responsible doctor, no, I can't see that happening.
Now, again, you highlight the word responsible, and I look at the doctors that he's gone to. Doctor, what was his name? Berkowitz, I think.
Yeah,
The guy
yeah.
who wrote the weird letter of, never seen a more fit specimen.
Well, all the doctors that are supporting him, Dr. Oz, and all these reality show, Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, talking about the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine, and I mean, yes, they're all reality stars. Like Trump was a reality star, and he still thinks he's a reality star. But the reality for myself as a lupus patient is that over the last 2 months, what I've experienced is I've experienced a shortage in my medication, which I've never experienced before. I used to be able to get 90-day refills, which is for me is 2 dosages a day, so 200 milligrams of this medication. And in March, I was given a 30-day supply, and then in April, I wasn't able to get it at all. And, I had to ration my own medication, which, the stress from that, the stress, I have a partner that is a frontline worker for the MTA in New York City, and the stress of both of those things triggered a lupus flare where my body becomes inflamed, and it can be very deadly, and it could actually send you to the hospital, which is the last place that somebody with an immunosuppressive disease wants to be, because
that's where the germs are. That's
yes.
Yes. I tell people all the time, why do you want to go to the hospital? That's where the sick people are. That's where people die.
It's true, and I don't need, anything could kill me at that point. It doesn't. I mean, I don't worry about COVID-19. I worry about anything, a cold, anything, any simple thing. So I take extra measures that other people don't. I mean, everybody wears a mask, but I have to be extremely careful when I go out.
Right.
I mean, as careful as we can be. I mean, I don't even know what that means, other than wearing a complete hazmat suit. Can we be really extremely careful? It's just that the fact is I don't go out every day, and sometimes I go out once or twice a week.
Yeah,
and
see, if I were you, I'd be going with the whole SCBA suit, air supplied, the whole 9 yards. Because I'm looking around, and there's a bunch of knuckleheads and nitwits out there who they don't care about you, Peter. They care about it's my freedom. These idiots who go into the supermarket. I'm not wearing a mask because I'm an American. What the hell does that mean? I mean, I see these videos, and look, as I tweeted out earlier today, I have the utmost respect for anyone who works in customer service, because if someone were to be dumb enough to say that to me, I think I would smack them. I really think I would. I think it's just a good, as my grandfather always said, sometimes you need to slap somebody upside the back of the head to make a citizen out of them. And I think a lot of people need a good slap upside the back of the head.
It's really, fortunately here in New York City, I've seen a lot of people cooperating, and it's truly amazing when you have almost 10 million citizens in our city. It's pretty remarkable how, considering that population, how well-behaved people are being, and we have flattened the curve, which is unbelievable. But we all worked very hard to do that, and it's very disheartening, because I do have a partner who is a frontline worker. It's very disheartening to see that disrespect for people that are putting their lives on the line every single day. The other thing that we have to remember, too, is while all this COVID-19 stuff is going on, Trump is in court with the Department of Justice not defending the law of the land, the Affordable Care Act, which has protections for 135 million people with pre-existing conditions. And guess what? COVID-19 is now a pre-existing condition. So, let's say Trump gets reelected, like our worst-case scenario. This court case is not going to be decided until after the election.
Right.
So, in the Supreme Court, they can take away your protection for pre-existing conditions. And if you have COVID-19 and you have long-term effects from it, you may not be covered.
Yeah, because that's the thing. We were talking to our kids about this, and look, the younger you are, the more invincible you feel.
Right.
And well, if I get it, it's just like a common cold. I'll get over it. And I'm telling them we really don't know what it means, what happens when you get it. We're seeing younger people having strokes and all kinds of things that they didn't imagine. And then they don't know what happens if it boomerangs back. So you're right. This could be something that follows you for the rest of your life. Who knows?
Right? We don't know. We don't know how, like when we become contagious with it, how long we're contagious with it. We don't know these things.
Right.
We don't know, when we stop being contagious with it. And we don't even know what immunity means. Like if we have, if we're positive to the antibodies, does that mean that we're immune? And why are some people getting antibodies after having it and some people aren't? So we don't know. And there are still so many questions. And that's our reality.
Yeah, which is why, again, doing the safe, the sanity. But, I hear people, again, you've got these knotheads and knuckleheads are saying, Peter, but, my freedom doesn't stop at your fear. And, to hear you tell the story that it would clearly, getting the coronavirus would be the end, as a lot of things would. What do you feel when you see these people who are cheering a gym owner defying the state and opening up to a gym that probably nobody in the crowd was actually a member of?
I mean, it's very hard for me to answer that question, only because it's extremely. I think about my partner. I think about him getting up every day at 5 a.m, putting on his protection, and he goes out there, and he keeps the subways moving in the city, and then I see him come home, and I see him disinfect himself, and then he takes care of me for the rest of the day, and that's his life. So I see that in other people too. I see other people who have caregivers that still have to work during COVID-19, and I mean, the only way that I would respond to what you just said are with expletives. So
we'll save that.
Yeah, it's very it's heartbreaking. It's there. I just really don't have any words. It's very upsetting. I
want to go back to a second to something you said a minute ago, but you early on being able to get the medication, in 90-day supplies, and then a 30-day supply. April, you weren't able to get any and ended up having to ration this.
Yeah.
Is your doctor saying that this is what led to your most recent flare up? Because I know you're really struggling right now.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible tragedy. Is it because of the fact that there's been a run on this stuff that this is what's kind of led you to this, or is there more to it than just you didn't have the maintenance drug that you needed, or the maintenance level that you needed?
It is a combination of not taking the required dosage and worrying about not having the required dosage. It's a lot of things.
Right. And then the other question that I follow up with that, it would be, how many yous are out there? How many people who are in the same situation that you're in are out there? And what, if your concern is medical cost, by being so short-sighted and misusing this drug for so many, how many more conditions are we creating, and how many more are we making worse? I mean, this is not the sign of a good leader in my view. And I guess that's where I'm going ultimately with this. This is really a horrible, horrible thing Trump has done.
You hit the nail right on the head, because he is creating stress for millions of people who take this medication on a daily basis, and he never once asked or mentioned us. He's never once. He mentioned us in the fact that we are communities that take this. He's mentioned, people with lupus take this medication, right? But he never said, I'm going to make sure and my administration is going to make sure that you will have your dosage. He's never said that. And you know what's even more upsetting is that most reporters have not asked that. Most of the media has not asked that. You have asked that. Most of the media has not asked that. And that is extremely upsetting.
Well, I've asked the question of if he can use the Defense Production Act to force people to go into meat processing or food processing plants, and then giving those employers immunity if those workers get sick. Maybe you could make sure that people get medicines. If you're saying this is the wonder cure, and
Right.
you know, maybe in 6 months I'm going to be proven dead wrong. Maybe the medical profession will all come around to saying we were all wrong. It's the miracle cure. Wouldn't you want to ramp up production? Wouldn't you want to use the Defense Production Act to say, you know what, if I'm saying this is the cure, we better damn well have enough of it to go around, and not just for me?
Absolutely. But I have a sad feeling, very sad feeling, that you will not be proven wrong, and all you have to do is look at that veteran study that killed veterans taking this medication.
Yeah.
And that is so heartbreaking. And those people didn't have to die. And, you know, people in my community are suffering. I know people, like, I talk about how, you know, I finally was able to secure a 90-day supply after suffering for a month. But you know what? There are people who haven't been able to refill their medication since March.
Yeah,
I mean,
and as I understand, and help me with this, because again,
Sure.
I'm very fortunate. I don't take anything. I'm very fortunate that my health is good, and I'm thankful for that every day. But it's my understanding that if you're taking this, be it for lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or whatever they're using it for, there's a period of getting you to, you know, like a functional level, like a stable level, that it's hard to get to that. I mean, there's a bunch of the side effects that people do feel, and there's a long laundry list of them. But to get your body used to a certain dosage takes you a while to get used to, and then to starve you of that, drop you back down. Now you're going to have to go back through that again, and I got to think that that's not good for you, right?
It isn't good. It isn't. You know, the thing is, and again, I'll say this again, because for any of these communities that I mentioned, whether you're in the lupus community and take this medication, or rheumatoid arthritis and take this medication, or if you have Sjogren's syndrome and take this medication, if you have an autoimmune disease, any stress triggers a flare for your illness. So what you're saying is absolutely true, but dealing with the stress on top of that can be deadly. So there are people who are going to die from rationing their medication or not being able to access their medication, and those people are not being considered.
But here again, you know, the sad reality is those people have never been considered. And, you know, I look at this, you know, over the weekend we saw the blame game. It's everybody but Trump. It's China. It's the WHO. It's the CDC, even down to, well, it's your fault for being old and sick. Which is, you know, the most disgusting of all. But, you know, I guess this is where we are, and this is why come November, it's so very important for people to get out and vote, or better yet, put that ballot in the mailbox. And make sure your vote is heard. Just my thought. Peter, I really appreciate the time. I wish you nothing but the best, and please take care of yourself. We want you to come back and keep fighting with us and for us.
I will come back for as long as I am here, Rick, I promise. And thank you for everything that you do, because it inspires me to want to keep fighting as well. And I think what we all need right now is hope more than anything. So my whole takeaway for anybody listening to this who is having difficulty accessing their medication, whether it's hydroxychloroquine or another medication, please hang in there. Please hang in there and use every resource that you have to get access to your medication. Please don't give up hope. Hope is so important, and I want to give you hope.
Good stuff. Peter, I appreciate the time as always. Thank you. Stay well, and I look forward to having you back again real soon.
Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Peter Morley. And like I said, there's so many side effects to this. The fact that he would throw this out in such a flippant manner I think speaks volumes to the fact that he really is unfit and unqualified to be our president. Just my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What do you think? Is he taking it? I don't think so. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that black author and Marxist theorist C.L.R. James passed away. James was born in Trinidad, at the time a Caribbean colony that was part of the British Empire. His father was a school teacher. James became a leading intellectual on the subject of black liberation. His most famous work, The Black Jacobins, tells the story of the 1791 Haitian Revolution, when enslaved black Haitians successfully overthrew French colonial rule. James was a frequent contributor to Labor Action, a Marxist journal produced in New York from 1940 to 1958. He wrote about the struggles of black workers. He often penned fiery language. For example, in 1941, James wrote an article imploring black workers not to cross the picket line during a strike against the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. Ford had a reputation of hiring black workers at a time when many employers discriminated in their employment practices. But James warned his readers that the Ford Company was no friend to the worker and that the company was attempting to use race to keep its workforce divided. James wrote, quote, "Ford is one of the most dangerous enemies of labor who exist in this country. This enemy of society has been laying a train of race hatred in Detroit and is now about to touch it off. The organized working class movement and the Negroes will have to fight hard and long to check and frustrate and defeat this sinister plot. This will be no easy fight." In other articles, James also used his pen to call out labor unions for not including black workers and to call for the unification of black and white workers in their struggle. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So around lunchtime this afternoon, there was a report that the Ford Motor Company was going to require Donald Trump to wear a mask when they visit the Ypsilanti, Michigan plant. And I immediately said, wow, good on Ford. Little backbone, little spine. But then by quitting time, the report came out that, they had done an about face, and they are not going to mandate that Trump wear the mask. And it's one of those things where, is it because he's on the miracle drug? I mean, was this the rationale? Because he's now protected himself with this giant prophylactic. And look, anybody who's a fan of the Naked Gun movies, I'm happy with getting him a giant prophylactic that isn't this drug. But the interesting part of this is a violation of the governor's non-essential plant tour order. It prohibits these kind of events, yet the governor has said that they're not going to enforce it. Which again, this is another one of those moments where leadership is about more than standing up and giving a speech. It's about leading by example. So if he's violating the governor's rules, what do you think those knuckleheads and nitwits who are screaming at policemen in the state capitol with guns are going to do? Just crazy stuff. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on this this revelation that evidently our president's on drugs. I have asked Dr. Keith Pochek to come talk with us, share some thoughts on this drug that maybe we haven't thought of. Maybe this is a great thing. Keith, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. Always enjoy listening to Peter as well.
And me too. Peter's one of those guys that I just have the utmost respect for, knowing the challenges that he faces every day, and the fact that he still gets up every day with a smile on his face and a fight in his heart. He's a great guy.
Absolutely. I think it's a matter of recognizing your calling and your cause, and so I think that's what feeds the fire. So that's always inspiring to see.
So let's get to this, because I'll start right where I started. I don't believe he's taking it. I believe this is just something that he blurted out. I'm taking it. It's not a big deal, and without actually thinking of the ramifications. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this doctor thought it was a great idea. The first thing I thought of is I thought of you as a physician. Is this a drug that you would, give to somebody who, according to the doctor, is perfectly healthy? Is this something that you would prescribe?
No, and I think and I agree with you. I don't think he's taking it either. I think with the thousands of lies that have been well documented that have already come out of his mouth. Is it something where we're supposed to believe this one? This one's the true one. No, this one's the true one, right? So it's just like none of us believe it, and of course not. How long are you going to continue falling for the same lies and same cons? But
yeah, checks in the mail.
He's not, exactly, and he's not. I don't think he's taking it. I think it's a question of how invested is he in the medication itself, and God knows we'll never know the answer to that. And if he drives up demand for it, and he's invested in it, and he's got plenty of dupes who will buy it. Then hey, it's a successful grift, and that's really what his entire life's been about. So, I'm equally skeptical whenever I hear you say that you doubt he's taking it, because so do I.
Yeah, no, immediately I'm going, nothing I believe comes out of your mouth. Everything seems to be a lie, and so why not this? But it got me to thinking about. Look, I get, he is who he is, but he does have influence over some people in this country. And then I'm starting to think about all of the doctors who are going to be inundated with these people coming in and saying, I need to be protected. I need to have this drug. And from what I understand, and look, I've talked to a number of people, and you're obviously the doctor here, but this is not something to fool around with. This has got some pretty heavyweight consequences.
Absolutely, yeah. Take a sugar pill instead if you think this one's gonna protect you from COVID, and you'll get a lot less side effects. So
no, but that's what I said firsthand. I first said if he is taking it, I gotta wonder if they gave him a sugar pill.
Yeah, I think that's and that's not to eschew the placebo effect. There's a real placebo effect for a lot of and that's not you were duped because you took a medication and you started to feel better. You began to feel better. But this is a real disease with real complications, and it's not like a mild headache and you take a medication, you feel a little better. Maybe you would have gotten better anyway. This is a real a serious problem with a mortality rate that's frightening, and it's not the flu and it's not a cold. And to be honest, the other thing that I think that hasn't really been mentioned that much is that it's not even an accepted treatment for active COVID infection, let alone prevention.
Right.
And so when this initially came out, there was a lot of press about hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin and using those two together. And if anyone tried to order those two medications and they work in a healthcare system that's got a relatively sophisticated electronic medical record and operating system, there would be a huge red flag that would pop up and say, hey, this combination of medication can cause dangerous cardiac arrhythmia. These are the two medications that are being lauded as the absolute cure. Just take them together, and mixing those two medications can actually be fatal. And no one had brought that up. So yeah, this has and not just the ones that Peter mentioned. Obviously, this could deprive lots of people who actually do need this medication from it, but could also cause a lot of harm in folks who otherwise should take nothing or just take a placebo, like you mentioned. So,
yeah, but
very dangerous.
You bring up a really interesting point, and as a physician, you've got someone presenting to you who's supposedly healthy, and I'm not gonna get into the whole whether he is healthy or not, but he's not sick at this moment, and he tells you, look, I want this to protect from something that I may not get.
Right.
Is it worth the risk of, as you've said, taking these two drugs in combination that has been proven to cause the heart problem? Is that really something that a doctor would go, yeah, that's a good idea? I'm still struggling with that.
I hope not. And I have the luxury as a as a physician / administrator, as well as someone who doesn't have his own primary care patient base. We do urgent care, so we're seeing essentially unscheduled, unplanned visits, and we can defer a lot of that stuff.
Right. I'm not asking you to second guess this guy. I'm simply asking whether any day of the week you would ever consider doing that.
No, not knowing what I know now, and I think that's the key, because recommendations change and studies come out and things evolve, but based on what every bit of data would suggest right now, I think that's a harmful combination, especially in someone who is well at that point. If someone's on death's door on a ventilator with one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel, you're willing to throw just about anything at him at that point, because it's a Hail Mary and you hope something works.
Right. That's why I agree with Trump. If you're in that moment, you're on the ventilator and they're going, we don't know what else to do. Sure, maybe we break out the Clorox. I don't know.
Exactly.
But
I think that's dead on. Yes.
But here at this moment, who again, his personal doctor saying he's healthy, the risk just doesn't seem worth it to me. Now, what's interesting is this has turned, because we all heard the stories about the guy on his deathbed. I think he was from Florida, where he was done. He was making his peace with his maker, and they gave him this miracle drug, and by morning he was up dancing the jig, and that's what we were told. Is it new, or is it just me coming around to finding out that now evidently this drug is not just the miracle cure, but it's also now a prophylactic? It's now a preventative, which is that new?
No, it's basically whatever would sell the most medication.
Okay.
That's what they'll tell you, right? Whatever drives the most sales, it could get more people taking it, right? Because if it's only a treatment, then you take it for a week or two and you don't need it anymore. But if this disease is going to be around for months and months and months and months, maybe everyone should take it for the next 2 years, every single day. You know what I mean? So I think that's my conspiracy theory angle here, because like you said, it's really difficult for me to believe that a physician actually prescribed this to him, and that B, he's actually taking it.
Yeah, because immediately as you're talking, I'm now starting to think about the guy, and I forget which pharmaceutical company it was, over the Oxycontin, I think it was, who said that he wanted this stuff to be sold like Doritos.
Yeah.
So now you're going through this, going, yeah, we just want to get people hooked on it and make them think they have to have it, so they buy more and more and more, so we can make big profit. And immediately my mind goes back to the Doritos.
And then you think you take a disease that's still yet as deadly as it is. 95% plus patients, more than that, are going to recover. So if you give them something that doesn't kill them, a large percentage of those people are going to say, hey, that's what did it. That's what did the trick. That hydroxychloroquine is what did it. When, if you had been giving them a placebo with a disease with a recovery rate that high, the number of folks that are just going to get better regardless is staggering. So,
but here again, this is where I'm in this weird spot, because right before I came on air, I was reading this story about a guy in Florida. You probably saw the same one, where him and his wife were on I guess it was Facebook or Instagram or one of them, talking about how it's all a big hoax, and they don't fear the coronavirus because they believe in God and all that stuff.
Right.
And then ultimately they both get it. And, evidently the guy's, just barely strong enough to make it to the hospital, where they immediately put both of them in intensive care. And miraculously, he kind of pulls out of it, and he's doing better. The wife, not looking very good for her. And this is one of those things where I keep coming back to leadership and this kind of false hope that this is going to be the miracle cure, that we're going to warp speed a vaccine, that it's all going to be just great, and within days we'll be fine, go back to your normal life. This is what really frightens me about the coming fall and into winter.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think when this, if it merges into flu season, we're going to have something on our hands that we hopefully will never seen and will never see again. Once those two things are going on concurrently, so I hope it's gone before then. I mean, I remember not too long ago we were thinking, hey, the peak numbers were going to be early to mid-April, and then it was going to be gone in May, and then the models start to drag things out, and now it's June, July. Next thing you know, we get it into October, November, and get flu season mixed in, and what that would bring upon the medical system is frightening. It really is.
Or either that, or you just start saying at the gate, going, "Sorry, we can't help you. Good luck. Maybe check your social media feed being part of it. Oh yeah, you said it was a hoax. Well, it's a hoax. Go home."
Yeah, right. And this is another thing that kind of shoots a lot of holes in this. The central conservative pillar of thought and rhetoric that small government and limited government is best, and nothing like a national crisis exposes that as a falsehood.
Yeah.
So you get a national crisis and economic collapse, and what you need right then to pull out of that is very effective government that's very well led and has just the best brains in the world working on policy. And so I think that's one of the things that the Democratic Party I wish would play up a little bit more. We're ultimately going to need, and not just for healthcare reasons and numbers of deaths and COVID itself, but the economic effects of that. We're going to need another New Deal president.
Yep.
And is Joe Biden that person? He's probably not, looking at his career, but I think the guy's adaptable. And I don't think that necessarily FDR was the most progressive, most liberal person until the circumstances demanded it. And
until the people also the people demanded it.
And the people demanded it. You're exactly right. The people demanded it, and they knew what they needed. And it's someone who will listen to kind of popular will, and also has a healthy respect, healthy fear of elections. And you start to wonder, does this administration have that at all? Do they have any fear of elections and the way things that could conceivably be manipulated? But I think that Biden is he past his political prime? Maybe a little bit, but I think he's also made a ton of very important, very strong connections, and has also been able to be influenced by a number of brilliant people that he's going to attract into his own administration and cabinet, and he's going to listen to them. And so I think that is he the reincarnation of FDR? I mean, I think obviously that remains to be seen, but we're going to need a New Deal president. And if there's any hope of the two folks running, which one of those can adapt and be a New Deal president, then Joe Biden's the one. Let's be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, of the two choices, and I say this all the time, Biden was my fifth choice. Yeah, but now he's my first choice because that's what's left. I got him, or it comes down to originally when I came out with I asked for bumper stickers. My bumper sticker idea of Biden or death still holds up.
That's right. That's exactly right. So yeah, we saw how long Justin Amash, is that how I say his last name? Amash, I don't know how you say it, Amash maybe, from Michigan, how long he lasted with the libertarian principle, which that doesn't really fly too well in today's climate, just for the same reasons that we just mentioned, this small, limited government that's going to leave you to your own devices in the midst of a national crisis like this and an economic collapse is not going to be who you choose to lead.
Yeah, no, I've always said it. I don't care the size. I want effective government. Get away from me with that small, less intrusive nonsense. I want effective government. I want a government that's going to, I don't know, maybe do a little bit better than this one did. And I think Biden is that guy. I think you're absolutely right. But Dr. Keith, I appreciate the time, man. Thank you for your professional input. I'm hoping people out there will understand that this isn't something you go run into your doctor to ask for, and maybe the social distancing, stay the hell at home, wash your hands, that kind of stuff. Maybe the common sense, reason, logic stuff will take over, other than, hey, there's a magic pill.
I hope so, and I think we're going to know so much more in the next week to 2 weeks as things reopen, and we're just going to see what happens to the curve. Obviously, if you're an unabashed optimist, you say, hey, everything's just on the way out, it's fizzling out. But we don't know that yet, and I think that 10 days to 2 weeks, we're going to see. Do we see that second spike? And if we do, look out, because things bleed into fall and into flu season, and we've got a nightmare on our hands. Right there with you. I appreciate the time, Keith. Thanks so much, man. All right, Rick, I appreciate it. Good stuff. Our good friend, Dr. Keith Pochek. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I love those nature shows that probe the behavior and intelligence of birds, elephants, and other fellow creatures. However, there's one exotic critter that shows have ignored and is crying out for analysis: humanoid superrichinoids. While some in this rare species seem like normal Homo sapiens, as a group, the superrichinoids exhibit aberrant destructive tendencies. In particular, an insatiable desire to accumulate boundless personal wealth, as if one's net worth is one's true worth. They view life as a primal competition to be number one, the richest of all. Robert Frank, an analyst of plutocracy, points to the insane competitive zealotry of Larry Ellison, the multi-billionaire co-founder of Oracle. Frank writes that when Ellison learned that a rival billionaire was having a 400-foot yacht built, a boat one-third bigger than a football field, Ellison rushed out to get a 450-foot yacht. Toys are one thing, but the uber-rich tend to feel entitled to exploit rank-and-file workers, crush small competitors, pay no taxes, rip off consumers, defraud investors, contaminate our environment, buy elections, monopolize markets, and demand to be publicly celebrated and idolized. But when poked, these wannabe demigods turn into wimps. Now that their freakish greed is being denounced by the American majority and politicians of both parties, the royals are squealing like pigs stuck in a fence. Their hubris is being openly mocked, and I suspect that their whimpering is due to their finally realizing that their bloated net worth can't buy respect, and they can't handle that reality. This is Jim Hightower saying we've got to get back to building a real economy based on the productivity and true genius of America's grassroots people.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've all seen the reports. We've all seen the fact that, something like 35 plus million people unemployed, 27 million people lost their health care in April alone. We're hearing horror stories from the front lines of working conditions that, aren't being met in a safe manner. In fact, as I said earlier, you had Sherrod Brown, going after Treasury Secretary Mnuchin saying, hey, how many lives is a boost in the Dow worth? How many people have to die to make GDP go up? Because look, if you look at what Trump has done with this executive order forcing meatpacking workers and food production workers back to work under the National Production Act, the Defense Production Act, and then giving those employers immunity, there's a real problem there. And as I've been saying, this is that moment. This is that moment where you have to decide which side are you on. The classic labor frame of, are you on the side of someone who can protect yourself or not? Are you on the side that's going to live or not? And here to share some thoughts on, will we see out of all of this a big boom in organizing? Will we see union density go up and the number of workers on the job having some say, having a voice in their working conditions, in their fight for better wages, hours, and conditions? I sure hope so, and that's why I've asked Sean Richmond to come talk with us. He's the program director of the SUNY Empire Center for Labor Studies. Also has a new book out, Tell the Bosses We're Coming, a new action plan for workers in the 21st century. Sean, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So, I've been saying for a while now that, out of crisis comes opportunity. And my hope is that this opportunity, maybe out of this crisis, is that there's been a sufficient amount of organizing done that maybe we will see a push towards an increase in labor density, much like my grandparents were able to do after World War II.
Maybe. It's a massively frustrating moment, though, because who knows what's happening out there? I mean, newsrooms are laying off reporters left and right. And even when we did have a lot of, reporters in this country, it's not like they were particularly focused on what's happening in the workplaces. And when I wrote my book, not to be a Debbie Downer, but I was sort of like, look, yes, we had a spike in strikes in the year 2019, and that's great, but all we did is we got back to like 1986 levels of strikes, and like 1986 was a pretty lousy year for worker protest activity. But we might actually be in the midst of an historic strike wave. But there's just no way to know because, strikes really require workers getting face-to-face and talking to each other, and we can't do that at this moment. But anecdotally, it seems like there's a lot of workers who have their backs against the wall and are being put into these positions of, like life or death situations. And there's just a ton of strikes going on out there. And so when the economy, quote unquote, reopens, or, people are learning this sort of, are gaining this muscle memory of like how to go on strike, how to mess with the bosses.
Right. I don't know about muscle memory because there's a couple of generations that know nothing about it. So for me, it's rediscovering the old concepts of our grandparents, of the idea of solidarity, the idea of unity, the idea of that workers in the workplace do have some power, and that I think we're learning now that with this whole essential workplace thing, that they need us. They need us a lot more than anybody ever let on before.
It's not just our grandparents. I mean, I think one of the mistakes of the last 30 years of like John Sweeney as AFL-CIO president and beyond was that we had this crazy notion of like, we'll put 20% of our resources into new organizing campaigns, and we're going to gain, 1 million new members every year, and somehow we're going to get back there. And like that was always insane and kind of not smart.
Correct.
The best value of new organizing campaigns is when workers organize, and I've helped 3,000 workers, 4,000 workers, I don't know. I mean, and I spent $10 million doing it, organizing new unions. That they come away with an experience that is a lot of what the so-called greatest generation came away with as well. This experience of like, I could lose my job at any moment. I am just totally dependent on you, my coworker. I have your back, you have my back. That stuff is what is incredibly contagious. And so really what we needed to be doing for the last 30 years was focusing on, like, we needed to be organizing campaigns that were sort of emblematic and inspirational campaigns, so that the workers in the camp, whatever came of it, win, lose, or draw, in terms of organizing that particular shop, they come away with this experience of, now I get it. Now I know how to organize me and my coworkers for the next fight. And what's happening right now is there's virtually no union staff involved in this. Workers are figuring it out for themselves, and they're learning some real lessons that are going to carry on in the future. And that is just it's the real bright spot of this very dark time.
No, you're absolutely right. It's why I think your book is so important. And folks want to take a look at it. It's titled "Tell the Bosses We're Coming: A New Action Plan for Workers in the 21st Century." We'll make sure we get links out on how folks can get a hold of that. But, from when we started this program 15 years ago, it was kind of along the lines of what you're talking about. I believe you organize just not just workplaces, but societally. When my grandparents talked about the organizing of the 30s and the 40s, they talked about being part of the community, where you had your weddings at the union hall, you had your events, and it was community based. It wasn't just, hey, I've got a good contract and screw everybody else. It was an entire across the board thing, and it wasn't just at work. And I often tell the story about, moving in with my grandparents and my grandfather telling me, you don't go across the street there and play with that guy's kid. I don't want you anywhere near there, and I'll beat you if I ever see you. Turns out the guy crossed the railroad picket like 50 years ago.
Yeah. No, I write in my book, I've got a section in my book somewhere in there, I don't know which chapter, that cultures of solidarity. That, like, what the 30s and the 40s did, and it wasn't just the sit-down strikes. It was also, World War II is significant, right? Because, I'm depending on you for my life. It built cultures of solidarity. And one of the mistakes that happened, like, we just sort of, the gains of the sit-down strikes and the 1946, 1947 strike wave got consolidated. The bosses made peace with us, and so we just sort of, there's a truce there, and what happened, I think, for a lot of the labor movement is that we coasted on our grandparents' success of building cultures of solidarity.
Yeah, things were good.
I criticize this in very explicit terms, because I think one of the worst things that a union organizer can do is to confuse solidarity with charity. And if you're coasting on the nostalgia of wasn't it great for your parents to have a union, therefore sign this card. Wasn't it great when your grandparents had a union, therefore sign this card? Is you're coasting on this barely remembered culture of solidarity instead of building a new culture of solidarity of your own. Right. And you build the new culture of solidarity by organizing, by going on strike, by having each other's backs. My wife, just as a small example, my wife was a teacher in two different charter schools. She organized both of them, and her coworkers were scattered to the winds. She lived in Chicago. We're now in New York. They're friends on Facebook, but 7-8 years later, if any of her former coworkers have a struggle, a problem, a difficulty in their lives, they're there for each other, because they were there for each other when it mattered. Right. They have a culture of solidarity that they built up by sticking their necks out for each other, win, lose, or draw. And both organizing campaigns were messy, and I wouldn't call them complete successes, but they built up that culture of solidarity because they fought back on the bosses, and they there for me. I'm going to be there for you until the day I die. And that's where we got to get to. And again, I think that's actually what's happening right now in these McDonald's stores and these Home Depots and wherever else. but it's so hard to quantify because, you know, we're all sheltering in place except for these essential workers.
Right.
You know, but I can't wait till we all get back to work so we can all go on strike again.
That is an excellent way of framing that. But, you know, and you write in the book about, you know, about the fact that, you know, our laws are broken and that, you know, you guys are you see these campaigns that go off. And a lot of times, you know, I did organizing for a while. You would go into a place and you knew there was no way that you were going to actually be able to get a contract because the employers were just that dead set against it, because the laws have been, you know, over the last 70 years, the ossification of our labor law, the pendulum swinging so far towards
the law
employment.
smiles upon a boss that wants to subcontract, freelance,
Right.
and offshore a group of workers that are forming a union. I don't know how many campaigns I ran. I would say, though, I mean, a couple hundred. I would say easily 1 out of every 3 campaigns that I ran, if we got to a certification, the bosses announced layoffs, which was perfectly legal. You know, it's like it was the smartest thing to do. I mean, I've got friends who are pro-union labor lawyers who, you know, when we're grousing privately, they're like, you know, like, honestly, I think you could be disbarred as a lawyer if you don't tell your employer client that they should just break the law. You're probably doing them a disservice by not saying, "Hey, there's no repercussions."
No, there's not.
There's nothing. Like you could probably be disbarred for not saying, like, "Yeah, break the law. Screw it." You know.
Which is why you know, in the book you talk about that, you know, we do need some changes. I mean, my grandparents' generation, and the reason I bring them up is they did come back from World War II and they did, you know, fight the battles in the workplace, but they also had the National Labor Relations Act for a short period of time that really gave them a major leg up until, well, 47 over Truman's veto. They passed Taft-Hartley and began.
Yeah, we had 11 good years. We had 11 good years. That's
right.
it. 11 good years of workplace law in this country, which is just insane to think about what a short window that was, but also how much progress we made in those 11 years. And yes, we need a totally new system of labor law. We need to amend the National Labor Relations Act. I think one of the problems, one of the mistakes that we make as a labor movement is that we overly focus on amending the National Labor Relations Act. The Employee Free Choice Act, the PRO Act, blah, 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 blah. Not going to make enough of a difference. We need systems of labor law that are all in, that do not base whether you have rights that anybody's going to respect on this like high stakes all or nothing election. You know, and like the right wing likes to analogize a union certification election to like a congressional election. Except when your congressman's on the ballot, you're not voting on whether you're going to have a government at all. You're voting just who's going to be your representative.
Right.
When you're voting for a union in an NLRB certification election, you're voting whether there's going to be a government at all. Ridiculous. I think we need to reject the entire framework of that. There needs to be systems of worker representation on day one. And I have a bunch of ideas in the book there. It could be works councils that look like the sort of the German model. It could be industrial labor boards that look like the first 2 years of the New Deal. I definitely think that just cause as a law rather than a thing that you bargain in a contract is a huge part of this. But we need to take away the boss's rights to secede from a system of worker representation. The boss should not have a say on whether there's going to be a government in the workplace. There's going to be a government in the workplace. The worker should be able to choose which political party they're voting for, but there's going to be a government on day one.
No, I'm right there with you, because there is a form of government there. It's a master and servant.
Yeah, it's a dictatorship. Yeah,
I mean that's the current law. You have a king, and then all of the subjects. And in the workplace, you have no rights. And I tell people this all the time, because unless you have a union contract, you're at will. You've got no rights, nothing.
And at will just means like you're free to quit. great. That's cool. I mean, they're also free to fire you at any moment. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So, you talk about this because, there are a lot of people who are, looking at union density in this country at a very low rate. And there are some people, maybe we can get back to where we were during the Reagan years of 20%, which is a dream, a pipe dream, I think, at this point.
It wouldn't do it. It wouldn't do anything anyway. It wouldn't make enough of a difference because there's just I could go. Yeah.
No,
sorry.
which is getting me to my question, which is, because there are people who do pine for the past. But you're talking about, if I'm getting what I'm reading in the book right, you're talking about, everything's on the table at this point. We're not tied to the past and all of the, all of the minutia of the past and all of the landmines that have been put in place that who knows where we're going to go forward.
What we as Americans understand as that's what a union is, that's what a union shop is, just a series of historical accidents. And so I think a lot of what we need to do right now is sort of we need to explore the roads not taken, both historically and sort of international perspectives. Because look, in France, do you know what the union density is in France?
About 5%, isn't it?
Yeah, and yet they can shut down the country.
Yeah, 95% of them, from what I understand, are covered by contracts of one sort or another, but only 5% are actually dues-paying members.
And the unions in France, they don't want to have every person as a member. They want the cadre. They want the leaders. They organize strategically to just get the leaders, and they pick issues and bargaining demands that will turn the vast majority of their coworkers out in a strike. But they're not like, oh, everybody here needs to pay dues. And there's a real power to that. And I think that the Red for Ed strike in West Virginia and Kentucky and all these teacher strikes that happened are very instructive because, teacher union density in the South is pathetic. But they were able to shut down these entire districts, and there's a lot going on there. I mean, you had principals sort of nodding and winking and saying, yeah, sort of encouraging the strikes. That's a big part of it.
Right.
But also, they were picking issues that resonated, and the real measure of are you an effective union is could you get the workers to go on strike, not could you get everybody in the workplace to pay dues to you. And union dues are important. You need revenue streams to fund an effective fighting organization. But I think that we focus a little too much on revenue and union dues in America, where I think we need a bit more of a focus on, what's going to get workers to tell the bosses to go F themselves.
And I think a big part of that, in my experience over 30 years of carrying a union card, is that the unions told us, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. I was a steward for a bunch of years.
Yeah.
And guys would come to you with your problems. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Where, I'm going back and I'm thinking about that, going, maybe that wasn't the right approach. Maybe we should have been going, okay, how can we take care of that?
Yeah, no, that's true. In the last 30 years, in the John Sweeney plus era, there was this big emphasis on like the business union model versus the organizing union model, and I feel like I want to reject that frame as well because I think it was sort of a strategic cul-de-sac that we put ourselves in. Because business union versus organizing union, it's not an easy frame. Like the union that I cut my teeth working at is the New York Hotel Workers Union, and they don't fit neatly into any model. Like I would call them a militant business union, and I would also call Local 32BJ and Local 1199 militant business unions. So it's the framework of like, pay your dues, sign this card, do this, sign this petition, do this action, do this, do that. Whether it's empowering or disempowering, it is more complicated. But if your revenue stream is based upon we need to get everybody that we represent to pay dues to us, therefore we need to demonstrate efficacy and value and sort of prove our worth, then yeah, it does start to turn into like a sort of a business model thing that is ultimately disempowering. And again, a good union needs money to function. You
Right.
need your dues payers,
And because you need to pay lawyers to fight things in
you got
court.
to pay
need
the
all kinds of stuff.
lawyers. Organizers on staff are important. I'm not trying to dismiss any of that, but the measure of what is an effective, strong fighting union should be more. If you said we're on strike tomorrow, how many of the workers are turning out with us? Rather than, how many of the workers are paying dues today?
No, excellent point. I remember the last time I was on strike, it was 1994. The last time the LTL freight companies went on nationwide strike, and I remember, wondering, hey, how many people around me are gonna go? Fortunately, everyone went out. Nobody crossed the picket line, but it was a question. The book, again, Tell the Bosses We're Coming, a new action plan for workers in the 21st century. We'll get links out on how folks can pick this up. Last question I've got for you on, and it's outside of the book. I'm looking at current events, and I'm looking at the, this Defense Production Act executive order of forcing people back into the workplace and giving employers liability protection. As an organizer, how would you use that because I've got to tell you, for me, it's one of these things that, I would be telling people they really don't give a what about you. Look what they've done. How would you use that, or am I blowing that out of proportion?
I don't know if you are, because I don't know if you are. I feel like what I've seen is that unions that have sort of legacy union contracts have mostly tried to work with their unions, and like here on Staten Island, Verizon is one of our biggest, the telecommunications company. It's one of our biggest unionized companies. Employers, and they were good, and like they suck in under normal circumstances. Like they're a crap employer under normal circumstances.
Right, but the union stepped up.
In this crisis, they were coming to the union with like really reasonable, like, okay, here's a 3-month duration work from home agreement. And like, let's figure out how for the workers. Verizon workers, I would say, are essential. You and I would not be talking right now if Verizon, so it was like, all right, so let's, like, for the line workers, let's figure out how can we have meet outside with 6 feet distance in the parking lots. And like the company was coming to the union with this because, like they had to. It's illegal, and the union, has a pretty good record of going on strike when the company messes with them too much. In non-union companies, it's worse, and in industries where unions are weaker, it's worse. And one of the things that one of the things that I'm struggling with right now is our power always comes from our ability to get face to face with each other as workers and to get in the boss's face. And like you can't do that in a pandemic.
Right. That's a little difficult, but hey, we've got technology like they've never had. So, I mean, you can somewhat get near each other. You can zoom in or, face, this or that.
There's that. I mean, our CWA local on Staten Island organized a car picket line on Saturday that I took part in. It was a good experiment in how to do this stuff. I'm really glad they did that. We're in a very precarious position here because the bosses are going to take advantage of this moment, and if we want to survive, if we don't want to get this, if we don't want to get sick, we can't do the things that we know could shut a boss down. So these experiments in terms of, car picket lines and I don't know what jam. Yeah, I mean the technological stuff is good. Jamming phone lines and virtual petitions and things like that are important. But at the end of the day, our power really comes from our ability to get in each other's faces, and then convince each other to get in the boss's face, and tell the bosses we're coming.
Now, I'm still looking at this as a lot of the union companies, and we've had union leaders on the program talking about what they've done to make their workplaces safer, as opposed to what unfortunately, employers and that workers don't have a union have the conditions that they toil under. I'm looking at this as an opportunity to wake people up, and maybe on a societal level, and do some of the things that we've talked about. But I'm really excited. I like the book. I hope people will pick it up. Tell the Bosses We're Coming, written by Sean Richmond. We'll make sure that we get links out on how people can pick it up. Sean, great talking with you. I appreciate the time. I hope you'll come back and talk with us again sometime.
I look forward to it.
Good stuff. Again, tell the bosses we're coming. A new action plan for workers in the 21st century. Excellent and perfectly well timed. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is the Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The ranges of storm surge could be anywhere between 10 and 15 feet.
Powerful cyclone headed for one of the world's poorest regions amid a pandemic. Man-made climate change leading to more intense hurricanes. Trump EPA refuses to limit toxic chemical in your drinking water. Plus,
physics and chemistry matter, that you can't spin them. They don't negotiate. They're not going to compromise with you. You have to do what they say.
What the COVID crisis should teach us about the climate crisis.
All of those lessons and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Biology just doesn't care. It doesn't care that it's causing a recession. It's not going to back off because it's an election year.
See? That's why you can't trust biology. Too partisan. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as if things aren't bad enough with the COVID crisis, now we're entering storm season.
Yes, we are. And we're about to see the first major collision of two simultaneous disasters, a destructive cyclone amid the global coronavirus pandemic. As we go to air, Tropical Cyclone Amphan, now a Category 4 equivalent, is forecast to make landfall Wednesday in low-lying Bangladesh and northeast India. Amphan is already the strongest cyclone ever recorded in the Bay of Bengal, with a projected storm surge of 13 to 16 feet, making it an extremely serious threat to one of the world's poorest and most vulnerable populations already struggling with the pandemic.
That's not good.
Nope. Here in the U.S., the first named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, Tropical Storm Arthur, has formed. Not expected to hit the U.S., but Arthur marks the 6th year in a row that a subtropical or tropical storm has developed before the official start to the hurricane season on June 1st. That used to be rare, according to the Weather Channel, but studies indicate it is becoming increasingly common due to ocean warming. U.S. coastal states are now scrambling to prep for mass evacuations and shelters complicated by the pandemic. And now a new study published on Monday finds that man-made global warming is making hurricanes and cyclones stronger. Scientists analyzed 40 years of satellite data, finding for the first time a statistically significant global trend, especially in the Atlantic. They found that wind speeds of hurricanes, typhoons, and cyclones have increased almost 10% per decade over the last 40 years, making it much more likely that a given hurricane will intensify into a Category 3, 4, or 5 storm.
So you mean as we're all worried about the coronavirus crisis, Mother Nature ain't paying attention. She's moving straight ahead with the climate crisis.
Indeed. And these findings are in line with climate scientists' predictions of how hurricanes will respond to global warming. Meanwhile, the Trump Environmental Protection Agency has announced it won't set stronger limits on the toxic chemical perchlorate, a byproduct of rocket fuel that has contaminated groundwater around the country. It causes brain damage in children. The New York Times reports that the Trump EPA acknowledges the damages perchlorate causes, but argues that further regulation is unnecessary.
So when he talked about doing away with regulation, that would be rocket fuel for our economy, apparently what he meant was doing away with regulations that ensured rocket fuel would be in our drinking water?
Yes.
Great.
In politics, presumptive 2020 Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden...
Who?
Joe Biden...
Oh.
has named Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York to lead his campaign's climate task force, along with former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. It's a sign that the Biden campaign is attempting to bridge the divide among Democrats and appeal to progressives and youth voters.
So I guess the progressive and youth voters, that's AOC, not John Kerry.
Right.
Okay.
Biden also pledged on Monday that if elected, he would cancel permits for the controversial Keystone XL pipeline. Finally, CBS's 60 Minutes on Sunday focused on how society might change post-pandemic, as has happened after every previous pandemic in history. Noting how fast clean air and water rebounded with less fossil fuel pollution, they asked longtime climate activist Bill McKibben about what the COVID crisis can tell us about the climate crisis.
Maybe we still have a window to take a step back. And if we do, maybe the Earth will meet us halfway.
You're saying flatten another curve.
Flatten another curve. Flatten the carbon curve, too. And if we did that, then people might look back in 50 years at this time and thank us, instead of curse us, because those are the two possibilities.
I'm guessing it's going to be the cursing us part.
But we still have a choice.
You're so optimistic.
I try.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple, or Google Podcasts. Find us, follow us, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember we spent a little time talking with candidates who were running under the platform of No Democrat Left Behind. The idea of going into areas that were held by Republicans and putting up a fight. And I've been saying for a long time, one of the things I thought Newt Gingrich did really well is he ensured that the Republicans had a candidate in every congressional election. There were no freebies. And I look at this race down in Florida's 3rd congressional district, where Ted Yoho, the Republican incumbent, is now announced, I guess at the end of last year, not going to run for re-election, like a lot of them, because, well, I think the writing's on the wall for a number of them. And Yoho was a guy who voted for the tax cuts for the very wealthy, but voted against making lynching a federal hate crime. So on one hand, we're gonna enrich the very wealthy, but insanity on the other side. And here to help talk about this race and hopefully unseat the Republican and turn this seat blue, I've asked Adam Christensen to come talk with us. He is a candidate in the 3rd congressional district there in Florida. Adam, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I look at Yoho as, the prototypical Republican, all in favor of all the bad ideas that got us into the mess that we're in now. And I see your seat as an opportunity to maybe undo some of the damage.
Yeah, and honestly, you're not the only one who kind of sees that. I mean, it's, we filed in January, and right before January, right at the start of the year, I was looking around, and my first thought was, as soon as I saw that Ted Yoho was going to retire, I thought, well, this changes everything. I mean, this is a +9 Republican district with an incumbent. And, we haven't really had a very good organizing structure, organizing power here to be able to really put up a huge fight. But 2 years ago, a lady by the name of Yvonne, she, with $25,000, got 43% of the vote against Ted Yoho, against an incumbent, and almost no campaign staff. And what that told me right then is, this is a lot softer red than most people are giving this credit for. And at the same time, with a well-organized team, it's probably something we can put into play. And so, I really thought, who should, I'm going to go help whoever this is. I started 2 companies right out of college. If it's financial, if it's volunteering, if it's whatever I can do to be able to help flip this seat because it's open, I'm going to. And so I basically looked online to kind of see, who was running. And that was who I was going to go back, whoever had the best shot on the Democrat side in the primary. And, I looked at both candidates that were running, and my first response was, oh, no. Oh, no.
No, your first response was the right one. I'm the best guy for it.
Well, honestly, at that moment, my response was, you've got to be kidding me. And so I was complaining to some friends of mine, and they basically said, you don't get to complain if you're not going to do something about it. And in my head, I was like, well, what could I possibly do about this? Like, I don't know. Like, what was it? Then someone was like, well, why don't you try? And I was like, well, what would it even take to get on the ballot? And turns out that it was 5,000 signatures or it was 10 grand. And at that moment, I was like, well, is that doable? And so I took the puppy out. He's a little Pomsky. He is absolutely adorable, 25 pounds, full grown, almost 2 years old. Went out with him, and within 2 weeks had 600 signatures, and started to realize that, the things we're talking about here, they're resonating. And basically sent out the bat signal. And within a week, we had 10 people all under the age of 22 that had joined on the campaign. And now it's 4 months later, and we're at 31. Every single one of them is under the age of 26. This is basically a young people-led movement here in North Central Florida with an organizing power that really we've never seen before. And I think it's changing the game. And everyone around here is just starting to get excited because it's starting to change the game.
No, and that's the hope. The hope is that your generation saves what my generation wasn't capable of holding on to, let alone building and moving forward. Because we're at this weird moment, and I've been talking about this for the last several weeks. Out of this pandemic, out of this catastrophe, out of the horrible governance that we've seen coming out of Washington, I do believe is an opportunity for people to step forward and to actually lead and undo the 40 years of anti-government rhetoric that's been shoved down our throats.
Yeah, and I mean, when I look at this, my first response, and when I talk to people, is they want to survive. They want to have a decent life. I mean, I say this all the time, but literally my pitch, my whole pitch, if somebody asks me what the pitch is, I say, if you work 8 hours a day, you should be able to afford a home. You should be able to start a family. You should be able to have enough money left over at the end of the week to go out to the movies and not feel bad about it, or not feel like you're going to run out, and be able to, have fun with your kids. Like, that's what you should be able to do. But most people who work 8 hours a day here, they don't have enough. They don't make enough to do that. I mean, the average income here, it's between $18,000 to $22,000 a year. And that's just the way it is. And that's what people have just come to almost accept. And so the phrase that we kind of came up with, it was a combination of 2 different ones, and I'm sure that you'll pick it up immediately. But what we say here, and when we're talking to people, is that everything that we're fighting for, it's for the many, not just me.
Right.
And that means me as a candidate. That means all of our staff together saying individually, it's not about me, it's about all of us. And that's when you have a group of people that are saying that, I think it's something special. And so that's something that right now, what we are doing is taking progressive left policies that resonated in FDR's time. And what we're doing is changing the way we talk about them to make them palatable, but also acceptable, and almost like what has been missing from conservatives and independents. Because right now, you're going into a pandemic, and you just mentioned this. I mean, the populist rage after 2008 created the Tea Party. It created the Occupy movement. How much worse do you think that's going to get, or better, depending how you look at it? Is it going to be now that we've bailed them out 12 years later? Because 12 years ago, you, I, my parents, all of our people, we invested in companies that were going under, that were failing. That's what it was. It wasn't a gift. Right. When we bailed them out, it was not a gift. And every investor that I've ever talked to, to start a company or to invest in a company, they expect to get their money back after 3 to 5 years. Well, it's been 12. And we never saw, and in that time, our education went up, our healthcare went up, our daily lives, everything in our life got more expensive, and those companies did better than ever. And we had to bail them out again.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But the argument that you make is, pretty much the argument I make for why we need stronger unions and more people to be joining and forming unions in the workplace. And, Florida is obviously a right to work state, which, leads me to probably one of the reasons the wages are 18 to 22,000, because the bargaining power of those workers is nil at this point. But
in the Florida Constitution, it actually basically says that no Florida worker that works for the state is allowed to strike.
No, and that's one of these things that I keep saying. We need a movement to come around to. And as you're talking the same language, but you're talking about it in a political frame, which I'm all in favor of. I think it's fantastic. The more that we can build communities, the more that we can organize society around ideas of ensuring that work is rewarded, that you can make a living on one income like my grandparents were able to do, that we can all have health care, that we can all have some bit of secure retirement in our golden years. These are all things that I think, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, I hope at least that it's something that you would be drawn to.
Well, I think that the next thing we have to do, and I think this is something that the left has really failed at for a very long time, is just in how we phrase things. I mean, we have the best policies. They're well thought out. They're done by some of the most brilliant minds ever. And we can't connect them emotionally. That's something that Republicans, and especially, people on the right, have been able to do for years. You mentioned Newt Gingrich. Terrible ideas, but he was able to connect emotionally with people to the point where they were live or die whatever he said. But don't you think now, sorry,
but don't you think that has a lot to do with the fact that the right has built really a masterful echo chamber of think tanks and focus group tested messaging, and then really a megaphone with the talk radio and cable news that's unmatched by the left on any level?
I 100% agree. And what you mentioned there, focus group marketing, the estate tax, what did they come up with?
The death tax.
They labeled it a death tax. Who does it affect? 0.2% of the population. Really just Wall Street bankers who have over $15 million are the only ones who ever get hit with that. But they were able to connect it emotionally so that people who were making $20,000 thought, I don't want that. That's not America. And my response to them right now, people everywhere, it's just because conservative media has been able to do this, they've been able to frame debates in a way that benefited them. And let me give you an example. Middle-class tax cuts. The way they want to do middle-class tax cuts gives you maybe $100 more a year, if that, in tax cuts. And at the end of the day, it defunds your education. It really, at the end of the day, costs you. But what is a middle-class tax cut? When we look at the healthcare industry from like a small business perspective or a startup, when you look at that and you look at an industry, what is the goal? The goal is to disrupt that industry, to cut the fat, to make it better. And when you look at the healthcare industry, what is the fat? Well, it's the middleman that we pay 30% of all of our money to, and that's a tax. Whether or not you want to call it a tax, it is a tax, because we pay taxes right now to the private and public, one to the government, one to private corporations. And when you connect it like that, because the Supreme Court, even conservative Supreme Court, said with the ACA that premiums and deductibles should be labeled as taxes.
I agree.
Well,
yep.
guess what?
They did. Absolutely. And you're
if
right.
You now pay twice as much as everyone else in the world and get half the benefits. So you want a middle-class tax cut? You pass Medicare for all. You want a small business tax cut? You pass Medicare for all or universal child care. That's what you do.
So are those your top two priorities, the Medicare for all and universal child care?
I would say
and universal education, I guess because your website says you want K through 16, right?
Yes, exactly. And right there, I mean, is another thing that we're really trying to do as far as our marketing goes, is we're framing these and saying these in a way the conservatives love. They want a middle-class tax cut. And then when you explain exactly what you're going to do and the fact that they're going to have $10,000 to $20,000 more a year, and you basically double the people's income around here. Universal child care, you spend about $8,000 to $10,000 per year. Healthcare, you spend about $8,000 to $12,000 a year. And if you take care of both of those things, you just doubled everyone's income overnight. And people love that immediately. And they've never heard of that way. And when you frame it that way and say it's a tax cut for you, it's not going to a billionaire or a hedge fund or a Wall Street banker, they're on board.
No, I'm right there with you. But here's the argument you're going to get, Adam, is that's socialism. Can't have that. Socialism's bad. I mean, that's the response that I get every time I bring those up.
And here's my response. For years, my grandfather, he's been a farmer his entire life out in rural Iowa, Harlan, Iowa. And 30 years ago, all the small towns around him started to dry up. Small businesses went under. And they looked around and they saw this and they thought, well, why? Well, the answer was there was a giant company who kept moving in, undercutting their prices. Small businesses go under, and then they replace their jobs with a job that pays a third, maybe half. That company was Walmart. And that town of Harlan, Iowa said, we're not letting this happen to us. These are all conservative, diehard Republicans, talk radio. And they said, that's not conservative. That is not what we believe in. We're not letting essentially a cartel come in and cut us out of our own lives and our family businesses that we've had for years. And they fought back and they did not let Walmart come in, and that town is still there. Well, here in Central Florida, same thing has happened. We have had giant companies come in, undercut all of our prices, drive out our small businesses. And what happened? We gave them tax cuts. We gave them corporate socialism to the point where we now have a corporate socialist society where we are bailing out giant companies every 12 years and expecting them to want to get bailed out when we're supposed to have a month or 2 month or a year's worth savings, and they can't even last a couple weeks, as we've seen with the pandemic. And so the way I frame that is, you already live in a socialist society. The question is, are you tired of giving your money to giant companies who then take it out of your town and your business and your community and take it somewhere else to whatever state it is? Because I don't think you want that.
No, it's an excellent point. And that's an excellent point. And it's one of the arguments that I also make is I think a lot of conservatives don't quite understand the conservative arguments, because right now there's a talk of universal basic income that's popped up. And I think Andrew Yang made it fairly popular now, but it was actually a Milton Friedman idea from the 1960s. It's what morphed into the earned income tax credit during the Reagan years. And the idea that, businesses need customers, you frame it in the way that Friedman did, conservatives go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But the idea of you're just going to hand people money doesn't really fly with them.
See, I find it interesting that every 12 years we can find the money to give hedge funds and speculators and gamblers. We can find the money to pay off their debts, their tranche debts, their gambling, their expenditures, their bonuses, their executives. But then when it comes to being able to have healthcare during a pandemic, or when it comes to being able to afford food, or, taking care of people where there's 25% unemployment, we can't find the money. Oh, we found the money and we know exactly where it's coming from. The question is, are we going to let people on either side of the aisle take that money and give it to their donors?
Right.
Or are we going to give it to the people who actually vote? And I think when you say it like that, it's very clear what the right answer is. And I think there's a perfect foil here with the pandemic, because, we've seen this for 30 years. Glass-Steagall, we got rid of Glass-Steagall, right? Well, we've had those kind of policies that have basically undercut and underfunded all of our services and the things that we use simply because somebody said, we want a tax cut. But they never actually explained how you pay for that tax cut. Because at the end of the day, the people who pay, people like you and me.
And that's
not going to be the
message
I
think that has to get out there more, which is why I'm thrilled to see someone like you running. And I hope folks will take a look at your website, for the many, notjustforme.com, right? That's what it is?
Yeah, for the many, notjustme.com. We have our social media out there as well. I think we have about 16,000 followers on Twitter, which is great. We just got, like you mentioned earlier, No Dem Left Behind, took a look at our race, took a look at us, what we've been able to build, because we decided that, this is bigger than just us, as the slogan shows. So we are partnering with state races right now. We've got some really good friends, that are running for state house here in Florida in predominantly Republican areas. And we said, look, there's no reason for us to compete in order to turn out voters. We need to coalition. We need to build. We need to actually do everything we can to help each other. Because for me, if the person down running in Marion County does well, that means I do well.
Right.
And if we do well here in the presidential, we do even better. And if we're going to flip Florida blue, that means we have to have everyone organized together. And so we are starting that right now. No Dems saw that, and they basically said, I love what you're doing. I love the fact that your campaign is 30 young people. Like I would be the youngest person ever elected if I was to get to Congress. And this entire campaign is run by people under the age of 26. Why? Because they said, we don't have another choice. When it comes to climate change, we don't have a choice. We don't want the people of Flagler to be our next door neighbors. We don't want just outside of Gainesville to be beachfront property. We don't have enough money to be able to, pay off student loans to the extent that they're asking, because all of the things in our lives that we've grown up seeing from Enron to 2008 to now have essentially been predatory. And they said, we don't have a choice. We have to do something. And I am unbelievably proud of them. We've got our campaign kickoff coming up on the 22nd, so Friday. The link is on our Facebook and our Twitter. It's virtual. We would love for everyone who's watching this to come join us and just kind of see what we're doing and really get a piece of it, because, what we're trying to do is something that hasn't been done here in 20, 30 years. And
it's incredible. I give you credit, Adam, and I hope you'll come back as this continues and share more with us. Again, for the many, not just for me.com, the website. You can also follow Adam at AC for Congress 2020 on Twitter. I follow him. I hope other people will boost that number up. And also, if you got a couple bucks, make a donation. These campaigns cost money. Adam, great talk with you. Please come back and talk to us again real soon.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Good stuff. Again, the website for the many, not just me.com. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at that. But really good stuff. I'd love to see more campaigns like this. Tell me what you think, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that black author and Marxist theorist C.L.R. James passed away. James was born in Trinidad, at the time a Caribbean colony that was part of the British Empire. His father was a school teacher. James became a leading intellectual on the subject of black liberation. His most famous work, The Black Jacobins, tells the story of the 1791 Haitian Revolution, when enslaved black Haitians successfully overthrew French colonial rule. James was a frequent contributor to Labor Action, a Marxist journal produced in New York from 1940 to 1958. He wrote about the struggles of black workers. He often penned fiery language. For example, in 1941, James wrote an article imploring black workers not to cross the picket line during a strike against the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. Ford had a reputation of hiring black workers at a time when many employers discriminated in their employment practices. But James warned his readers that the Ford Company was no friend to the worker and that the company was attempting to use race to keep its workforce divided. James wrote, quote, "Ford is one of the most dangerous enemies of labor who exist in this country. This enemy of society has been laying a train of race hatred in Detroit and is now about to touch it off. The organized working class movement and the Negroes will have to fight hard and long to check and frustrate and defeat this sinister plot. This will be no easy fight." In other articles, James also used his pen to call out labor unions for not including black workers and to call for the unification of black and white workers in their struggle. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So real quick, before I wrap things up, evidently Space Force, evidently the guy who was the chief the human chief space flight guy at NASA, this Doug Lavero, evidently he resigned yesterday after less than a year on the job. And evidently tomorrow is, or I guess really soon, there's supposed to be a launch happening, the first orbital crew to launch from U.S. soil in just about a decade. And just before that, this guy bails. The early reporting out of it is that, one of the head guys, kind of a giant a-hole, and that this is part of that. I got to think it's more than that. I got to think you don't give up a job like this over just somebody being a jerk. So I'm gonna keep an eye on that, because it's one of those things I'm kind of interested to see how this whole thing plays out. I would like to have a space exploration force. I think who knows what comes out of it, except for drilling on the moon. And finally, turns out the woman behind Roe versus Wade, you may remember her, Norma McCorvey. She passed away a couple of years ago. Evidently, there is now a documentary out that says that in the years that she turned to being an anti-abortion person, she did so because the conservatives paid her. And who didn't see that one coming? So I'm sure that's something else we'll talk about at some point in the future. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.